Good evening, welcome. There's an enormous volume of spiritual teachings, of philosophies, of metaphysical worldviews, all these sorts of things that are inundating the spiritual marketplace. If you find yourself interested in these things and you begin to look into it, the bombardment of information is astounding. Is there an essence to it? Is there a specific objective reality that it's really about? And is this reality relatively simple? And is this reality addressable within your experience? And the answer is yes. It turns out that all spiritual teachings, all spiritual information, all yogas and spiritual practices are oriented around one thing. Or they're oriented around nothing, i.e. fantasy. But those that are genuine are oriented around experience. The real fundamental question in spirituality is, what is experience? Of course, we all unconsciously think we know what experience is. I know what experience is. It's my experience, and I'm going about my life, and I'm seeing things and doing things and acting and doing all these kinds of things. We are all very used to relating to our experience in terms of what we hold it to be, what the objects of experience and the apparent situations and entities that experience seems to apply consist of, and we orient towards these situations and entities and so on. And we largely take experience itself for granted. Experience is like a relatively clear window through which we're seeing the good stuff, the content of experience, the people, the situations, the things, the entities, our own selves, our own self-image, our own self-worth. All of these kinds of things are what tends to captivate people's attention. And people in general do not give any significant attention to experience itself. What is experience? What is experience? Studying experience itself is the short path to realization, is the short path to discovery of actuality, to discovery of what is going on, to discovery of what this is, to the discovery of what you are. And experience plainly reveals this fact because it is explicitly what it is. It is not hidden, it is not concealed. Experience reveals itself very nakedly to direct observation. But of course, there is a rub, which is that we are typically so addicted to relating to our interpretations of what our experience is that it can be very difficult to disentangle ourselves from all of that sufficiently to notice experience itself, this medium, what it is that is present here. Because we immediately jump to the content. We immediately jump to the objects and entities and people and things and situations that we think are present, and we ignore the actual medium of what is present substantially. What is substance is present. Experience is a thing. Experience is not just some strange, nebulous quantity that enables us to deal with things. Experience itself is a thing itself. This is a thing. Experience is a substance. Experience has a texture. Experience is a functioning. It's an actuality. It's not just a medium to enable us to get to the good stuff. And it turns out, in fact, that experience is the only good stuff that there is, because all the apparent stuff that seems to appear in experience consists of nothing but experience itself. So we are tricking ourselves when we orient to all of these supposed things and we ignore experience itself, because we are bypassing the accessible actuality, the actuality of experience, which is actually present, in favor of all of these things and conditions and circumstances, which turns out are not actually present. It's very much like a dream. When you're dreaming at night, the only thing that is actually present is dreaming. There's no other thing present. There's no other entity present. There's no other substance present. And yet, when you're lost in a dream, you're typically not aware of the dream, are you? You're orienting towards the situations, what's happening, where am I, what's going on, what am I trying to get, what am I trying to avoid? And all of that is actually completely non-existent. We wake up in the morning and we can see none of that was there. None of that was there. All it was a dream. The only thing that was present is a dream. But when you're in the dream, it can be hard to notice that because we're so rapidly seduced towards these interpretations that we are addicted to, that we are fixated on, that we give importance to. It turns out that all the circumstances and things and entities have absolutely no importance, and what actually does have importance is experience itself. That's completely backwards. That's completely upside down. You know, most people will not think like that. It is strange and alien in this culture to think like that, to propose an idea like that. But that happens to be the case. And it happens that experience itself is the very shortest path, the very shortest road, the very shortest practice that leads to the discovery of what this is. If you can be with your experience itself as it is, as a substance, as a functioning, as an actuality, you will see what it is, and you will see what you are, and you will discover your actual condition, which is astoundingly different than the normal Western worldview, than the normal materialist worldview. In Norse mythology, they had this rather nice image of the rainbow bridge. The rainbow bridge was the bridge to Valhalla, and the souls of the dead warriors would cross the rainbow bridge and go to their reward. And this is a rather nice image because your experience is the rainbow bridge to reality. Literally, the substance of your experience is the bridge to absolute, complete reality, complete transcendence, complete liberation. And one end of the bridge is right here. Where's the other end? Where's the bridge you're going to? What's the bridge to? I invite you to cross the rainbow bridge of your experience and see what it is, see where it leads to, see what it's made of. The way to explore your experience is by texture, by feeling, not by analysis, not conceptually. Experience has a texture. Experience has a quality. Well, of course, experience has all qualities, doesn't it? Because all of these qualities that we all experience in our experience, we experience color and brightness and darkness and all these things in our field of vision. We experience frequency and pitch and timbre and all these qualities in our field of sound, so on and so forth. So all of the various sense fields, or the various arbitrarily defined fields of experience, are thick with characteristics, enormous range and array of characteristics being presented. And yet, they are all nothing but experience. And it turns out they're all very similar. We're used to thinking of, perhaps, our sense fields as being very different. Light is very different than sound. Sound is very different than touch. Touch is very different than thought. But if you look very closely and unbiasedly, without preconceptions, at your experience, you will discover, I think, that, in fact, it is all the same thing. It is all present. It is all instantaneous. It's all right here, right now. It is all alive. It's vibrating. It's pulsating. Light scintillates. Touch, touch tingles. Sound, buzzes and hums, and it's moving. It's alive. It's vibrant. And all of experience shares this essentially vibrant quality, with different degrees of subtlety. Some, touch has a certain sort of you could say a coarseness perhaps, superficial. And if you go to thought is, maybe much more refined. But if you look at thought closely, you will notice the same thing. It shimmers. It's vibrant. It's alive. It's not static. You cannot find anything static within experience. You cannot find anything that is not constantly flowing, vibrating, shifting within any portion of your experience. So simply feel your experience. Be with your experience texturally. Be with your experience like you're listening to a symphony. If you're listening to a symphony, it's very abstract. It's not about anything. It's just these different textures and timbres, and the sound swells up and it goes back. And your experience is just like that. Your experience is just this constant, play of energies, and it gets, loud. Sometimes it gets quiet. It comes up. It gets sharp. It gets, you can assign all these qualities and characteristics to it, but it is what it is. And the actuality transcends our ideas of it, and above all, it is actual. These textures are actually here. They're accessible. They are present. They are explorable. You can feel them. You are feeling them. You can't not feel them. Experience is by feeling. When you say, I see light, what you're really saying is, I feel light. You feel light in your experience. When you say you hear sound, what you really mean is you feel sound. You're feeling the sound in experience. And so if you're with your experience on this level of a textural presence, of feeling, of quality, you're at the starting end of the rainbow bridge, and you can just be with these energies, these qualities, this liveliness, this actuality, and see where it comes from. Where does it go to? What is on the other side of this? What is this, the context of this presence, of this energy field that is present as your experience? And there's nothing more to spirituality than that. It's really that simple. All the rest of it is elaborations and minutiae and looking at this portion of it or that portion of it, or trying to collapse it down or trying to morph it into putting it in certain terms or what have you. But the reality of it, the actuality of it, is simply this fact of your experience. And so if you start there, you're dealing with the mother lode, you're dealing with the essential fact, the most powerful, accessible fact. And since you're dealing with the direct phenomena, you're dealing with it with maximum efficiency, just be with that, and that is the royal road, that is the short path, that is actually realization itself. Experience is reality, and when you see what experience is, that is what realization consists of. It's that simple. Not as an abstraction, not as a great thing that happens after 30,000 lifetimes, or you have to write it in capital letters and put it on your altar and bow down to it. Just the simple fact of what this actuality is what realization is all about. There's no higher realization. Jesus Christ and Buddha and Muhammad and the Dalai Lama and Deepak Chopra and John Lennon didn't know anything other than just this simple fact. This is it. And so by using this fact of your experience as your starting point, you're actually starting at the finish line. You're starting with what the answer is. It's like going to the back of the book, in your school books where all the answers are printed, and we'll start there. Well, that's a little bit easier, isn't it? You don't need to go through all the middle stuff. And this is really true. This is really, really true. Experience itself is the solution to the great dilemma of what is life, what is reality, what is spirituality. It's the means to that solution, and it is in fact the solution itself. So it's all very efficient. It's all very, it's like one of those apartments where the bathroom and the kitchen and the living room are all crammed into one room. It's very efficient. You don't need to, there's not a lot of wasted motion where you need to thrash around. It's all just right here. It's just this. Very direct, very efficient. Neat and easy. We can chat now if you'd like to. If you'd like to say something, if you wouldn't mind speaking into a microphone, that way people who are following along online can hear what you have to say. A few feet this direction will be good. Thank you.
So I'm continuing to practice along the same lines that I've spoken to you about before. I am today was very interesting. I got here, rode up with a friend, and I was in Telegraph Avenue and just hanging out, and, doing some meditation of sorts. And just walking around, a few moments where just that undescribable quality of presence just came over. Just so completely outside of the normal perception, but also very ordinary, very like, this is just how it is.
Good.
It just faded in, faded out, faded in.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday I was at the cafe where I usually have dinner in Santa Cruz. Ran into a guy that I know. He's a staff member up at a Tibet Buddhist center on outside of Watsonville, Pema Olseling, and he's about to begin a 3-year retreat. And I didn't get into a whole thing about what I was doing, but he was sharing about his path, and he was saying what he's been doing, what he will be doing in the retreat are these specific practices that are designed to clear obstacles, very intense. So the bottom line is, I'm wondering if maybe I'm very well intended, but I'm wondering if, because it's said that you need a lot of merit and a lot of preparation to do, and even the Longchenpa books that you recommended, which I'm continuing to not read, just read little passages, just use as a sort of seed of contemplation. Mm-hmm. It said in the beginning that somewhere in one of them that this is for a certain level of practitioner. And so I'm wondering if I'm maybe kidding myself, thinking that I can do this type of very ultimately simple, but maybe not so easy to implement practice.
Yeah. If you can recognize it, if you can recognize the profundity of it, which you clearly can or you wouldn't be here, and you're very articulate about the ways in which you are with it, that is evidence that you are sufficiently, unfolded to be able to work with this. The only requirement to being able to work with this is having access to it. It's kind of like being a child where the counters are a certain height. The only requirement to doing things on the counters is being able to reach them. If you can't reach the counters, then of course you can't do anything on the counters. And this is very much like that. There's no esoteric, requirements or preliminaries or conditions that have to be met. The only real issue is access. And access is affected through recognition. Recognition is the means of access. And you clearly recognize this profundity, or you wouldn't be drawn to it. You would be looking at the Longchenpa books and you would be going, what's he talking about? But if you recognize, wow, there's, even if it's not clear, but if there's something here and it's really, powerful, it's really resonant, that itself is access. That itself is meeting the requirements.
Peter, I have tremendous respect for you, and I have tremendous respect for my friend John Wheeler, and a teacher in Sonoma, not really a teacher as such, but he shares the same wisdom prasana, and yourself, John, and prasana are the 3 people I trust. And part of my practice is it's sort of a devotional or faith. I don't experience it. When I meditate, I just say to myself, even though I'm not able to fully grok this, these guys aren't BSing me. They're telling the truth that this is reality. So that's one of the ways that I work as well. And
you experience it yourself. Like you said earlier when you were on Telegraph today, you noticed that there's this profundity that is actual, that is here, that is not mutually exclusive with normalcy. It's not like there's normalcy and then you leave normalcy and you come to this amazing quality. It's an aspect of this very presence. Normalcy, what we call normalcy is present. What we call a transcendence or whatever is present. And it's just different aspects of the same thing. It's not mutually exclusive. And you do recognize it. You can recognize it. And that recognition, simply that recognition, is working with it. That's it. That is the very nature of working with this, is recognizing it, feeling it, being with it, and it will show you what it is. It will, transform you, so to speak. Not that there's a you that needs transforming, but it could be sort of metaphorically said to be like that, in the sense that it reveals itself through recognition. It progressively will reveal itself more and more profoundly what it is, and as it reveals itself what it is, it reveals what you are, it reveals what all this is, and everything becomes quite clear. And this is all affected just through contact, just through that recognition, just through being able to be with it. It can be very brief. It doesn't need to be stable. And by all means, don't try to cling to it. But when it comes, acknowledge it, be with it, appreciate it, feel it. Just feel it. Don't worry about getting it or not getting it or making sense of it or integrating it or anything. Just let it take care of that. But the fact that you have that contact is enormously powerful. Don't underestimate that. It's enormously powerful, even if it's very rare and very occasional. Just be with that actuality occasionally when it happens, and that's the totality of the path right there.
I sense that it's sort of like the ox herding pictures in Zen. Are you familiar with that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The aspirant sees the tracks and...
Yeah. It's a lot like that. I mean, that's a little over-elaborated. But, yeah, basically, you get a sense that there is something, and you track it down, and eventually you encounter what this something is, and through being with it, you learn to integrate with it, or tame it, or whatever, depending on your analogy. But again, the fact that this is an actuality within your experience, which it is, indicates that you are well into this process. And whether you don't need to not doubt it, you don't need to even trust it. You just need to be with it, persist. And you can have doubts. You can have, you can be, analyzing it, wondering if you're doing the right thing, and be considering alternatives and all. Because that's just working to the mind. It means nothing, because what this is transcends the mind. It transcends thought. It transcends doubt, without needing to cancel it or eliminate it. It just doesn't matter.
That's the whole point of Longshep's, what he's saying.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and what this is nothing other than this actuality right here. This all we were talking about is just this actuality that's right here, right now. This is it. There's no higher or more subtle or more profound truth than this presence. This right here, right now, is the three kayas. Without needing to understand it, without needing to fathom it, without needing to know the names, but the fact is that is the case. And simply being with this presence as it is the path, is enormously transformative, and is also, it turns out, the goal. So, the path is the goal. What you realize by being with this is this itself that you've been being with. So it's all, it's rather paradoxical to try and talk about it, but the engagement is very, very simple. It's very, very simple. It's just simply being with this presence openly.
Yeah, the unfabricated nature of it, when I'm having those intimations, it's so completely outside of my little window of the universe, my sphere of experience.
Yeah. And it's, since it is outside the personality, outside the mind, the personality and the mind don't matter. You can have all sorts of faults, you can have sloppy thinking, you can have personality flaws, you can have all sorts of liabilities in terms of your functionality, and it's completely irrelevant. It has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't matter. It's not about that.
Yeah, this guy yesterday, he's been working extremely hard for the community, and they need people now, and I thought maybe I could go on staff here. I don't think I have the energy. I don't... I'm pretty aware of my limitations, and I'm not like a Milarepa or a super karma yogi. I am what I am, as Popeye said, and I guess that's okay from this.
Well, it's more than okay. Letting yourself be what you are, and then let go of it. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to punish yourself for it. Because it turns out just to not matter. Because spirituality is not about self-improvement. Spirituality is about reality, and reality is already reality without you needing to be any different than you are, without anything needing to be different than it is. It's not about changing things. It's not about improving things. And mind you, changing things and improving things is fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. But it has nothing to do with realization. It has nothing to do with spirituality per se. It's a side project, you might say. By all means, save the ecosystem, fix the political system, save the whales. I mean, the whole deal is great. If you want to do that, that's fine. But it has nothing to do with realization. Nothing whatsoever. You can do all that and be completely unrealized. Or not do all that and find realization, and so on and so forth. So it's a matter of understanding, or not understanding, seeing what this is about, seeing the essence of what this is about. And what this is about is actuality. And actuality is already actuality. It doesn't require some improvement in order to become actual or more actual. Actuality cannot become more actual. It can't become less actual. It can't be touched. I mean, that's the dorje, the diamond, is this untouchability of actuality. You can't improve it. You can't diminish it. You can't damage it. You can't make it go away. You can't make it come. It's just this. And that is what all the fuss is about, just this actuality.
The mirror that can never break.
I'm sorry?
The mirror that can never break.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And there's all these analogies about it and poetic ways of putting it that are more or less clear, or actually more or less unclear. But it's not even about being able to put it, it's just about the fact itself, and then being with that fact through direct experience, just feeling it. And just simply that simple feeling of this actuality, of this actual presence, is the direct path in itself. Just that. Nothing else required whatsoever. And is also, turns out, the goal.
Thank you, Peter.
It's difficult for me to overemphasize or to put forcefully enough how just this presence that is present. I mean, you feel you're present. Experience is present. Reality is present, right? That is it. That's just this. Just feel that. That's all. That's all. That is the short path. Just right there. Without concept, without striving, without doing this or doing that, or especially not doing this or not doing that. It just doesn't matter. Because what you do or don't do, or are confused about or not confused about, doesn't touch this presence. This presence is here. Right? It doesn't ever get more present, doesn't ever get less present. And that's where the power is.
Hi, Peter. One thing thought I heard you say tonight was that I don't recall from previous times was that thinking or thought is a sense.
Well, Sure. A sense, let me put that in context. Your experience could be, let's say your experience is a field. Okay, your experience is, the totality of your experience, let's call that a field, arbitrarily. And we're in the habit of compartmentalizing within that field various subsections of that field that we differentiate. So we're in the habit of compartmentalizing our field of vision, our field of hearing, our field of touch, our field of smell, our field of taste, our field of thought, various other...
Thought seems like an additional one that I hadn't...
Well, but it's arbitrary whether you class it as a sense per se. Thought is certainly an experience, right? So thought is, you know you're thinking so because you experience what we call thinking. I mean, exactly what it is may be nebulous or subtle, but the fact that when you think, you know you're thinking, so this is something that is occurring within experience. And is distinguishable from other things. You don't confuse, typically I suppose, you don't confuse thought with touch or thought with hearing. It has its own distinct sort of textures or characteristics or whatever that enable us to instantaneously recognize it. And so I'm using the word sense field as a way of talking about these compartmentalizations within our experience. And the important point is that these categorizations are largely arbitrary, and in actual fact, if you look closely, you can discover that all of these sense fields are actually the same thing. They're made of the same stuff. So all of your experience is essentially the same. It's the same substance. It's the same substance present in the same way, doing the same thing as any other portion of your experience. Mind you, with different textures, let's say, or different frequencies, or what have you, which is what enables us to differentiate them. So, if you look at what light is, which is difficult to do with your eyes open because we're so used to going to the objects. We don't see the seeing. We see what the scene is. You don't see light. You see people and chairs in a room and all this. Typically, because we're trained, our minds are addicted to going to it like that. Yeah. But if you close your eyes, for example, all of a sudden there's no particular objects, but there's nothing. You see light. There's light there even when your eyes are closed. And then you can experience light itself outside of very directly outside of the context of things. And you discover that it is a sort of a sparkling, dynamic, tingling, instantaneous presence that, the particular, that it has sort of patterning and comes into being instantaneously and goes out of being instantaneously. In short, it exists just in the present moment. And if you listen to sound the same way, and again, sound can be hard if you're listening to someone talking, you hear the words, and so on and so forth. But you can listen to white noise, listen to an air conditioner, listen to, the sound of tires as the cars drive by on the street or something that's relatively undifferentiated. You'll find the same thing as this sort of present, sparkling, tingling thing that is remarkably like what you see when you close your eyes and watch all those little tiny, tiny dots tingling in your field of vision. And the same if you feel what exactly is touch, so you feel touch. And again, it's this tingling presence that is, very dynamic, very vibrational, existing instantaneously in the moment, sort of coming into being and going out, simultaneously and so on. And thought as well. Thought is very obviously very sort of fine textured and very subtle in terms of the substance, the apparent substance of it. But if you look at thought, if you're just with thought itself, you will discover a similar kind of a phenomenon, that it has this dynamic, vibrational, tingling presence in the moment. And if you pursue this, you can come to discover that your entire field of experience is essentially one thing. It is, well, you can't say exactly what it is. Of course, it can't be put into words. But you can say that it is, very unstable. It is very present. It exists only in the instant. It's very, very highly patterned, but the patterns are very unstable and constantly shifting, and are also, you can't pin down any of the patterns. Even though the patterns are very present, when you try and follow one and get all of its detail, it gets mirage-like. It opens out, and you can't quite pin down the final details on anything, and so on and so forth. So you can discover these various characteristics of experience. But ultimately, you discovered that experience is the reality, and the universe is not. We're used to having everything asked backwards. Delusion consists of holding things as real, and experience is just a convenient way to interact with them and engage with them. And it turns out that's completely backwards. That's upside down. That's inside out. The actuality is that experience is the reality. Experience is what is actually here, and the things are just ghost-like apparitions of the way experience works. Very much like a dream. In a dream, there's nothing actually present. There can seem to be something present. There can seem to be all these qualities and characteristics, but again, you find it's all very transient. It's all completely unstable. Nothing ever really completely resolves itself. Has anything in your life ever completely resolved itself?
Probably none.
And not just in sort of broad strokes, but in the details. You look at something you're actually looking at, and you try and see, what exactly am I seeing? What exactly are all the details of what I'm seeing? And you go into it, and it's like you took acid or something. It's, gosh, there's just so much there. You can't get to the bottom of it. You can't get to the end of it. And all of experience is just inherently like that.
I guess that I somehow feel that like the difference between, say, thinking and, say, listening. Or something.
What does the difference seem to be, would you say?
Well, like thinking is more amenable to being altered.
Is it?
It feels like it to me. Listening seems like you are perceiving what's arriving.
Do you have control over your thoughts? Do you know what you're going to? Do you have control over your thoughts? Do you know what you're about to think?
Well, you can go from one thought to another by choosing to do so. It would seem.
Well, it may seem that way, but is that really true? Do you ever know what you're going to think? Do you ever know what the next thought is? Do you plan to have a thought before you have it? Do you think to yourself, in the next instant, not necessarily in words, but do you find yourself thinking, let's see, next I think I'll think about such, It's not quite like that, is it? If you look at the way the mind works, it's sort of, the train of thoughts is happening, and we think of ourselves as sort of doing it or participating in it, but if you look very, very closely at what actually happens, you don't know what you're going to think, investigate for yourself. See if you can control your thoughts. See if you can and plan your thoughts. See if you can take your thoughts and send it in a particular direction and have it not spin off and go somewhere else. Ever.
It's still okay. Well, we were talking earlier about texture. The thinking seems to have quite a different texture than, say, looking or listening.
Well, it does, doesn't it? It has its own texture that is distinctly its own. But light has a very different texture than sound does, right? We don't confuse. You don't hear something and think you're seeing something, right? You recognize immediately sound has its own sound-like texture, and seeing has its own light-like texture. But again, and they're clearly different. They're clearly differentiable. But if you look very closely at what they actually consist of, they are variations on a theme. They are, like different frequencies of the same phenomena.
Now, one other thing that just occurred to me was that thinking and dreaming seem a lot more similar than, say, hearing and seeing.
Maybe. But in a dream you can hear, in a dream you can see, in a dream you can touch, you can pick something up and hold it in a dream, you can feel it.
Yeah.
You can break a leg in a dream. You know, dreams are very concrete. I mean, we forget this when we wake up.
Yeah, I've had some dreams where I've cried.
Sure, of course.
And I'll wake up, and usually at that point I wake up, and I have to touch my cheek to feel if there are tears there, because I don't know whether they're there or not.
Sure, of course, yeah.
But
then when you do wake up and you look back, you see, well, there was no tears, there was no eyes to have the tears, there was no face, there was no body.
Yeah.
It was dream. It was dreamed. It was a very strange apparitional phenomena with nothing there other than the apparition. And when you go to sleep, of course, it's hard to say it from this point of view. When you go to sleep, if you could look back on your waking experience, you would notice just the same thing.
Yeah.
When you go to sleep, where's your face? When you go to sleep, where are your hands? I mean, when you just go into deep sleep, they're gone. Right. Just like now, the face and hands and body and things you had in your dream last night are gone. Mm-hmm. It's just the same. This is no more here. This is only here in the instant when it's here. The dream stuff is only here in the instant when it's here. And when it's here, it's here. But what's here is the apparition, the experience. Experience is actual. But what you seem to be experiencing, what we usually interpret experience as being in terms of objects and environments and circumstances and so on, is all essentially free associated. We supply that in our imagination. You know, I imagine I might be in a room and there might actually be other people here that I'm talking to. Maybe not. Maybe I'm dreaming. Maybe I'm completely psychotic and I'm locked in a rubber room somewhere hallucinating all this. How could I know? How could I know? Yeah. But the fact of this apparition, regardless of the interpretation of what it is or isn't, is undeniable. And that's the important fact. Whether there's an objective world is irrelevant, but the experience that I call objective world or not is undeniable. And that's actuality. That's the powerful point. There is this experience. And you can get a whole lot of mileage out of just that fact.
Say that fact again, please.
That experience is present. And experience may or may not be of an objective world, it may or may not be of a dream, it may or may not be of whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know, extrapolations on supposed experience or supposed interpretations of or explanations of experience. But all that's unnecessary because experience itself is interesting enough without worrying about whether it's this or that.
It also seems like the experience of dreaming in some ways is the same as this.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's the point. If the experience of dream is the same as this, and when you wake up you know in your dreams nothing was happening, what does that imply about this? What does that imply about this world? What does that imply about these people? What does that imply about you, your body, your life?
Good questions.
Yeah, they are good questions. They're very good questions.
What are the answers?
Well, look and see. Look and see. Look at the dream and you'll see what the relationship between the dream and the apparent circumstances and bodies and peoples and so on is. They're apparitions, but they're not essential. The dream is not dependent upon the apparitions are dependent upon the dream. See what I mean? In other words, you dreamed you had a body, but the dream didn't appear because of the body you dreamed you had. The body you dreamed you had appeared because of the dream. The dream is the basic phenomena, and bodies and circumstances and lives and stories and excitement and all that is just a byproduct of that fact. See what I mean? The dreaming is what's really happening, and then it looks like whatever it looks like. And if you can't tell the difference between that and this, what does that say about this? The real fact is this experiencing. And whether it looks like, oh, I'm in Berkeley, or I'm on the moon, or I'm whatever, is not the basic fact. It's just a byproduct of the basic fact, which is this presence, this amazing, creative, intelligent, conscious presence that experience is intrinsically, just like the dream. Right? You go to bed at night, you don't know what you're going to dream. You can dream anything at all. You know, and it seems to be real while you're dreaming it, because the dreaming makes it so. But the only reality there is the dreaming. All the apparent circumstances and the events of the dream borrow their reality from the reality of the dreaming. The dreaming is real, the circumstances are not. They're just apparitions. And how can you tell that from this?
Equally, when you wake up in the morning, you don't know what life you're going to live that day.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. You don't know what life you're going to live, you don't know what thought you're going to think, and yet the experience effortlessly, easily, with no exertion whatsoever, supplies it all in real time, right when you need it. You know, you don't need to know what life you're going to live because it's being taken care of. The moment happens, and then you know. It's like, well, what's going to happen now? Well, this. Did I have to do anything to make something happen? No, it's just bang, it's all here. Just effortlessly, poof. You know, the moment is always here. Completely springs full-blown into existence with all of its details and implications. Right? Always. Yeah. It never fails to show. It's not like the present moment ever fails to show up, does it? I mean, it's always...
Then we'd be really in trouble.
Peter, the analogy of the dream, the experience of dreaming being synonymous with the experience of experiencing in what we call the non-dream world. For me, breaks down in a kind of mattering. I noticed that you were talking about it in a clearer way, at least for me, or it seemed more understandable how this could not matter, and yet the mattering seems to matter so much more in this experience than in a dream.
Does it really? You can say that now that you're not in the dream, but when you're in the dream, is it really? Some dreams can seem to really matter, don't you think? Don't you find? And when you're there, you don't know it doesn't matter until you wake up. In retrospect, it's easy to say that, right? I mean, and whether the issue is not whether or not it matters. The issue is to illustrate the relationship between the actual phenomena and what it looks like. In dreaming, the actual phenomena is the dreaming. And what it looks like is the dream. What happened? Like, what did you dream about last night? Oh, I dreamed about blah, 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 blah. That's the dream. But the relationship between those apparitions and the actual phenomena, which is the dreaming, is the interesting fact. Because what it looked like didn't actually happen. What actually happened was the actual phenomena, which is the dreaming. And we are so used to putting that the other way around. We aren't generally particularly interested in the phenomena of dreaming, let's say, but we're very interested in, what did I dream about? I had a great dream last night. I dreamed about this and that, and it was wonderful. I won the lottery and, whatever, right? But because we fixate on the content, we're used to relating to the content of our experience, and we're very careless and cavalier and generally not giving much attention to the mechanism by which we experience it, the mechanism by which it appears. What I'm calling experience, or what you can call the dreaming and the dream state, and so on. But in actuality, that's what's really happening, not the circumstances. And we typically have that backwards. We typically reverse that. In the waking state, we certainly do, most, I would say. I mean, I'm generalizing, of course, when I say we do this sort of thing. But I would say that, you can look for yourself and see if you do it, which is, of course, the important thing. And especially look at what the evidence for that is. Suppose you drop dead right now. Suppose you had a massive stroke. What would it matter what was going on in this room? Suppose you're dreaming last night and you're in some dream and then you wake up. What does it matter what was in the dream? Because the interesting fact is not the circumstances, because those are just apparitions and they come and go and they're unstable and they never resolve into anything coherent anyway. You can't ever say what you really dreamed about.
But this does.
This does what?
This does come and go, but there's a lot more of it staying than... A lot
more of it what?
Of it staying. And
nothing stays. What do you mean staying?
Well, the mattering of the waking life, I can see how it can be taken more seriously if the circumstances are just seen for the circumstances themselves, without balancing that with the circumstances and the context in which they occur. But it seems like they both have to be accepted and appreciated and paid attention to for what they are and how they work
when you
together.
when you say they both have to be paid attention to for what they are, for what purpose? What's the benefit of doing that?
Well, it seems like there's repercussions if you don't. It just makes things harder.
What's the repercussions if you don't pay attention to experience? Suppose you pay attention to the circumstances of your life. What's the repercussions? The repercussion is one day you'll be on your deathbed looking back at all the circumstances of your life, noticing whether you thought you were a success or your failure at various times. And what good does that do you? Suppose you live a really successful life and you took care of all the details and paid attention to all the circumstances and were really highly functional and all that. What good does that do you on your deathbed? What sticks around then?
What matters then? It's like it's the experience. It's the fullness of experience when it's happening.
Yes, exactly. But what does the fullness of experience when it's happening consist of? This is what I'm talking about. What makes the fullness of experience?
It seems like the appreciation of the attention that is paid to it as it's happening.
Sure, but what is attention? What is attention? What is it?
It's the savoring of it as it's happening.
Right, but what does that mean? What is savoring? What does that consist of? Where does it come from? What's doing it? How does that work? Is experiencing ever not savoring itself? Just the present moment coming into being is not the very fact of its coming into being in your experience a savoring? You know, you glance out the window and you see something, that's a savoring. Right? You glance out the window, there's all these leaves and these branches and the sunset, and it's like, okay. How does that happen? What is that? Suppose I looked out the window and saw something else. Would there be any less savoring?
Somehow it seems to be fuller when there's a recognition of the fact of savoring. I mean, it's like a double. It's like more things are coming into play. There's the sensing, and then there's the recognition of the sensing, and that seems to make it.
But that's what I'm talking about.
Richer.
That's what I'm talking about. Recognize the sensing, recognize the richness of that intrinsically, which is independent of what it happens to be resting on. Right? You may be looking at this or you may be looking at that, but there's no less richness over there than there is here, or over here. And the richness doesn't come from that or this or this. The richness comes from this. By all means, savor that, be with that. This is what I'm talking about. Like with a dream, dreams are always luscious. Even when they're horrible, they're amazingly horrible. They're richly horrible. Right? Where does that come from? It doesn't come from the dream, it comes from the dreaming.
Well, it's interesting that that's the one quality that doesn't seem to automatically be there in the dreaming, is the recognition and of an appreciation of it while it's happening. I mean, you're so caught up in the experience itself that is what it is.
May or may not be, but this depends upon how you are with your experience. The same thing applies to waking condition. You know, you can be with your experiencing in the waking condition very sensitively and perceptively. You can be with it very insensitively and automatically or mechanically. But what it is the same in either case. And as you unfold, as you mature, you develop the capacity to be with it more and more richly, more and more profoundly, to be with it more and more appreciatively. But that's not about circumstances. That comes from the experiencing, that comes from the savoring, that comes from the noticing, which is not dependent upon what is being noticed. See what I mean? I'm not advocating, necessarily completely giving up life and saying screw you to circumstance and I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to shit on the floor and I'm going to, go rob banks and by all means you can do that. Some people do, but I'm not saying that's necessarily a good idea. I'm just recommending a reassessment of priorities, and I would say most people are way overbalanced in terms of prioritizing their interpretations of their experience, and they're way under-biased in terms of noticing and appreciating the mechanism of experience. And also, by coming to notice experience itself, you will discover a drastically different, vastly valuable perspective on what this is that's going on here. Rather like in a dream, like going lucid in a dream. The difference between just being in a dream and plodding along and dealing with the circumstances on their face value, and then discovering you're dreaming and going lucid in the dream, the difference in perspective of those two ways of being with that event is profound and amazing and liberating. And what it feels like to be in a dream and know you're dreaming and know you're not stuck in these circumstances is a vastly different perspective than simply plodding along within the dream on its own face value of event. And the same thing applies here. The difference between thinking you're a human being stuck in a shitty situation in your life, having to deal with problematic situations day in and day out to, fight to stay afloat, and you're getting older and your body's falling apart and circumstances are just generally pretty shitty and the government's a bunch of crooks and too many people and the world's going to hell in a handbasket. The difference between that perspective and the perspective of transcendental, infinite, radiant consciousness is, has a very different feeling tone, has a very different implication in terms of a sense of where you are, what this is.
So it's like going lucid in the waking state?
Yes. Which is nothing other than seeing what this phenomena basically consists of. When you go lucid in the dream, you notice you're dreaming, that's all. It doesn't necessarily change the dreaming or what seems to be appearing in the dream. That all can just keep going on, but you get, oh wow, this is a dream! Oh! And bam, very different context, radically different, right? How about this? You've been plodding along thinking, oh God, here I am in my shitty life, and I've got my history, and I've got my neurotic personality, and I've got to deal with this and that and the other, and blah, 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 life sucks, then you die, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, this is just a transcendental experience that just looks like that. Wow. Where's experience? Where's your experience happening? What's it floating in? What's it sitting on? What's holding it up? Here's your experiential field right here. Where is it? What's it in? What's it coming from? What's it shining forth from? Where's the projection booth?
Well, I've been recently thinking a lot about mattering and hearing people say that nothing matters, so this doesn't matter, and
there's a vast difference between simply asserting something like that and seeing the truth of it. It's easy to say, oh, nothing matters. Why doesn't it matter? Do the math. You have to see when you see what this is, you'll see for yourself whether or not it matters, and you'll see for yourself the way in which it matters. But until you see clearly what this is, you're not competent to say whether or not it matters. You can say, well, if I see it from this point of view, it seems to matter. If I see it from that point of view, it doesn't seem to matter. But you don't have a powerful way of weighing one perspective against another. But when you discover the actual perspective, this is an actual situation. It is actually in a certain way, right? What's happening here exists in a certain way. It is as it is. It is what it is. It's not just nothing. It's something. It's very much something. And when you see, you have to see exactly what this is to see the perspective from which to interpret what's going on and the degree to which it has importance and the degree to which it has repercussions and so on and so forth. To just say nothing matters, nothing has repercussions is just a hollow assertion. It's just bravado, unless you have a basis for it, a powerful basis. And the only powerful basis for assessing anything is what this actually is.
well, it seems seeing what this is can be seen better by seeing how it is.
Sure, what it is, how it is. I mean, doesn't.
Or not paying so much attention to the circumstances, as you said.
Well, it's not that not paying attention to circumstances is in itself a good thing. It's more remedial training because we're so used to paying all of our attention to circumstances. I'm not saying don't pay any attention to circumstances, but I'm suggesting as a vehicle for exploration, we're so used to paying all our attention to our circumstances. How about a little equal time for the context? How about a little equal time for how and what are these circumstances appearing? How are they being experienced? What's experiencing them? Get a bigger picture on the whole thing. And then you can discover the meaningful perspective within which you can see what it is, and then you can see for yourself the degree to which it matters or doesn't matter, and the way in which it matters or doesn't matter, and so on and so forth.
So you can actually see experience.
Of course you can see experience. You're seeing experience right now. But the trick is to see experience, don't see the circumstances. And we're usually such circumstantial junkies, we go bang right to the circumstances. Unconsciously. It's not that we're doing it maliciously or stupidly, we're doing it unconsciously. We go right, bang, what's going on? Who's here? What's happening? What's my place in this situation? We do this unconsciously as a knee-jerk reaction to our unconscious worldview of, oh, I'm a human being, I am in this body, I'm in this situation, I'm in a causal situation with a past and future, and there's repercussions and blah 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 blah, the whole shtick, right? We don't think that out every moment. We just assume it unconsciously, and because of that fact, it's very difficult for us to be with experience as experience, because we tend to jump to it as circumstances, which are interpretations of experience.
Well, I think that I do see experience, but I'm thinking that perhaps paying more attention to that enables that to broaden or become fuller.
Of course, yeah. Pay more attention to your to experience itself. I mean, the real question is, what is experience? It's like in the Matrix. Remember, you saw the Matrix? The big question: what is the Matrix? In the Matrix number 1, Well, that's the question here. What is experience? And so play with it. You look at it, and you explore anything that seems to be a possibility to get you a different angle on that, to extricate yourself to some degree from your usual ways of being with it, which are numbing just because they're habitual, right? They're not fresh. They're not immediate. So play with ways of extricating yourself from your habitual addictive ways of being with this, and explore it from fresh angles to try to get a clearer fix on what this is. What's experience? I mean, that's the only question. It's not even esoteric. It's really it's physics. What is this? Here it is. What is it? And usually the biggest impediment to investigating that question is we think we already know. Oh, it's the world, and I'm in it, and I'm a human being, and I'm in my body, and I was born in 1950, and blah, 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 And because we go to that kind of interpretation, we ignore anything else. Because bang, we go to that. It's our default mode of being with this.
I seem to go to the senses.
Huh?
I seem to go to this, to try to get a handle on what is actually happening in experience. I don't seem to get beyond the senses.
That's good.
And the sort of intuitive sense of what could be happening, or just something that you're just not sure of.
The senses are actuality, and then senses of what's happening is interpretation. So it's important to distinguish those. The senses as a presence are actuality. They're not an interpretation. You're not interpreting them into existence. They are actually here. Light is actually present in your experience, whatever you think of it or not. Whereas when you think of it or interpret it, then that's another sort of layer of phenomena. But being with your senses is great. Be with light. What is light? And light is an experience, because light isn't just light. Light is perceived light. How is it perceived? What's perceiving it? What is consciousness? Light and consciousness go hand in hand, because light only exists through consciousness of it. So light reveals consciousness. Consciousness reveals light. So there's a fascinating yin-yang there. Great. That's fabulous. Be with that, by all means. That's great. That's a very direct way to explore experience.
Well, I was reading Longchen Rampa recently, and
a lot of that going around.
He's big here in Berkeley. And he was actually talking about this being outside consciousness.
Talking about what?
It being experience was not necessarily consciousness.
Right.
It's outside, or it's beyond.
Yes.
Consciousness.
Yes. This is in a technical sense. In Buddhism, they analyze a consciousness as a perceptive consciousness, like a part of physiology. So they analyze, 5 consciousnesses for the 5 senses. There's consciousness of seeing, visual consciousness, auditory consciousness, and so on and so forth. And what each of those is, what that comes from, is technically more primal than the consciousness themselves. So consciousness is essentially a mental functioning or a personal functioning, but it exists in and arises from a ground which is absolutely impersonal and beyond consciousness. But that's unimportant, but that's only a technicality.
Of which you can experience?
Yeah, because that's only a technicality for purposes of analysis, because it's a continuity. Okay? There's no actual gap or wall between these layers. It's not like there's light and then consciousness of light and then the ground of consciousness of light and then the transcendent. There's no like moat between these different terrains where there's this section and then a moat. And it's a continuum. It's seeing the same thing as a you know, it's analyzing it. So in other words, I can say, okay, there's light. Then I can say there's consciousness of light. But I'm not talking about something else. That's right here. That is the light, seeing it as the consciousness of the light. And the consciousness of the light arises from the radiance of the ground. And so in that place, the light is the consciousness of the light, is the radiance of the ground. And then the radiance of the ground exists within the transcendental ground, which is, you know, beyond everything. You can't say anything about it whatsoever. But this is that. It's not like that is over there and this is here. So when you look at light, you're looking at that whole chain, because that chain is not made of separate links. It's just, each link is just a different way of describing or looking at or holding this whole phenomena. All this collapses. This is the absolute right here. It's not like there's a superficial layer of things and then a deeper layer and then a deeper layer and then a deeper layer and then you get to the absolute. That's only for... analytically, it looks like that. Describing it, it looks like that. It's like you can describe this superficially, then you can describe it more profoundly, then you can describe it more profoundly. But it itself is always the same thing. It doesn't change when you describe it. See what I mean? So yeah, this is light, this is consciousness, this is ignorance, this is samsara, but this is the absolute. It's just different ways of looking at the same thing, different ways of analyzing the same thing. There's only one phenomenon. But in terms of being with it, in terms of learning to be with it profoundly, it can feel like a kind of appealing layers of the onion. But the layers aren't actual layers, they're layers of your own understanding. So you be with something as profoundly as you're capable of being with it until you discover a more profound way, and then you can say, oh, I've moved from this to that, but there's no actual this or that. That's just pragmatically speaking in terms of your own subtlety of being able to be with it. But it itself is the same. It never transforms. Do you follow that?
Yes, and that just keeps happening.
Yeah. Yeah. But by all means, pursue that. Be with any aspect of experience, and then be with it more subtly, and not by abstracting it, but by be with it more presently, more detail, more refinement. It's not about going into your head or going into imagination. It's about the actual detail, the immediate, undeniable actuality of what is present. That's where the power is.
Peter, as you are describing the referring to the absolute or ground consciousness and the relative sense consciousnesses. Mm-hmm. It occurred to me, I just got a strong sense that the mind stuff would normally be thought of as a mental chatter, the discursive memories and just ongoing commentary of the ordinary thinking. From the perspective which you're speaking, that's not a problem. That's none other than just the activity of the bigger
Yes.
mind. And I
Yes.
brought that ever so slightly, but
Yes. All of this activity is the radiance of Sambhogakaya. All of it. Our ignorance, our stupidity, the mental chatter, our obsessiveness, our attachment to things, our misinterpretation, all of that is itself, describing it like that, is a misinterpretation of the primal radiance of Sambhogakaya, which is everything. That's the point. That's why it's called great perfection.
there's no fighting anymore.
Yeah, because everything is it. There's nothing that's not it. There's nothing that needs to be purified. There's nothing that needs to be removed. There's nothing that needs to be abstained from. There's nothing that's better, or for that matter, worse than anything else, because it's all actually the Absolute.
That is such a relief. I mean,
Yeah, it's what a load off, eh? Thank God. Yeah, good, very good.
Thank you.
So the implication of that is being with any phenomena whatsoever is being with the Absolute. So be with your neuroses, be with your moodiness, be with, some horrible scene among stupid people, be with anything, and that is the Absolute. That is itself the direct radiance. Doesn't matter. Does not matter, does not matter, does not matter. And then everything whatsoever is the path, and everything whatsoever is the goal. And on that lovely note, I'm going to wish you all a good evening. You're welcome to stick around if you want. We'll be having some refreshments and some more informal visiting. If you'd enjoy that, please feel free. And thank you very much for coming tonight.